All right. Hello, friends. I can't quite tell if we're live yet. I'm hoping we are. Oh, there we go. Sometimes there's a little delay, as we've seen before, but hello. Welcome to another American Gods Chat with M. I'm Emily Whitten, your chatting host. And as with other weeks, I just wanted to say welcome. And my handle, as you'll see there on Twitter, Instagram, etc., is @the_Emily_ESSE if you want to hang out with me and let me know what your thoughts are on this past episode, the next one, American Gods, any of the things I recommend, whatever you'd like. It's all good. Just come and say hi if you'd like to and, hang out. So I have been starting with a couple of recommendations each week to kind of share some of the stuff that I'm doing during this pandemic lockdown and just in general. I've mentioned before that I am the co-creator and co-writer of the Underfoot graphic novel series. I have mentioned, and I think perhaps even shown, the Underfoot book 1. And I'm very excited to show off the Underfoot book 2, which arrived in our household pretty recently. This is an advanced copy, and we are super proud of this beautiful book that we worked so hard on. And I think if you like the Underfoot book 1, you'll love book 2. And if you haven't read either of them yet, you super should, because they're stories about adorable, intelligent hamsters with special skills who have adventures in the Washington, D.C. area. And there's mysteries, and there's friendship, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. A lot of weird science based on real science. And we may have predicted some real-world events. So, give it a read. It might interest you. Other things I would like to recommend this week. One of these things, the Reduced Shakespeare Company podcast, is based or came out of something I've been a fan of since probably about 2000. So for 20 to 21 years, I have known about the Reduced Shakespeare Company. It is a small theater company that takes William Shakespeare's stories and abridges them into a comedic performance. With the first one they started with was all the Shakespeare plays. And then they've branched out since then, and they do the Bible abridged and history of XYZ things abridged. And it's just so clever and fun and hilarious. And I first saw like a high school performance of the script that they had done on a VHS. I know I'm old. Back in college, that my college friend had been a performer in, or a stage crew person in. And then I bought the script book because I thought it was so funny, and I read the script book, which was great. And then I got to see them, including at the Kennedy Center in DC, and I got to meet Austin Titchener and a couple of the other cast members. It was really fun. So this podcast is basically Reduced Shakespeare Company discussions with other actors and writers and Shakespearean scholars and all kinds of talented creative people who are somehow connected to what the Reduced Shakespeare Company is interested in and or does. And they're little snippets, something between 15 minutes to half an hour per podcast. And they're just super fun. There's a ton of them. You can get them on like Apple Podcasts or probably tons of other places. I just happened to go through that. And so I recommend them for some fun, but also some interesting, deeper cuts on, acting, Shakespeare, being a playwright, a director, etc. Some really fun stuff in there. And the other thing I would like to recommend, because we are all stuck at home, this is not a new thing, it's been around for a while, but it's super fun, is the board game Carcassonne. I have played this game a ton. It is like a little world building game. You build these cities and rivers and things like that, and you basically try to outwit the person you're playing against or the people you're playing against. If you are at home with some someone else in the household, you're looking for something to do, Carcassonne is a really fun board game, and you used to be able to play it online. There may be a new version of that, but at the very least, the in your hands game itself is still out there, and you can easily find it. I'm sure Amazon, etc. Lots of places have it. We'll probably put some links to that. But yeah, so there's some recommendations for some things to listen to, some things to play, and some things to read. All right, so don't forget, after this, at 8 o'clock tonight, when Stars is doing their new episode, which is also available on the app, but I like to watch it at 8, I will be live tweeting. You can tag me, AGChatWEMMNSU, AGChat with M, Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And Also, you know, a bunch of the folks associated with the show sometimes tweet during the like live tweet it. I know that Bruce Langley has done it. The American Gods Twitter account does it. You know, Yetide has done it. Yetide Badaki, who plays Bilquis. Ricky Whittle has done it. So you'll see them, you know, kind of coming in and out. And Ashley Reyes has also appeared in the kind of live tweeting of all of that. Speaking of Bruce Langley, Tech Boy, who we see right there, Ricky Whittle is doing this thing that I mentioned last time called Moon Mondays on his Instagram Live. I love it. He basically just talks to somebody else on the show and is sort of interviews them, but a lot of it is just them kind of goofing around and chatting. And it's super fun. But also, like, you can ask questions in the chat and they'll maybe answer some of them if they see them, because there's a lot of people checking that out. I think this past week there were like 500 to 700 people watching live when I watched the Bruce Langley one. So a bunch of people already know about that, but if you've missed it, it's super fun. 1 p.m. on Mondays on Ricky's Instagram Live. I think he's just Ricky Whittle on there. It's either that or Mr. Ricky Whittle. So yeah, check that out. And the Bruce Langley one was super fun and super goofy. And I think it went on for like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, which usually they're more like an hour, but there were some technical difficulties at first. So that's our introductions. And now that we've got that out of the way, we're going to talk about episode 5, which we saw last week and which I adored. There were a couple of main things I really loved about it. One was seeing some of Tech Boy's background, and another was Bilquis'S continuing story. And so there's a lot more than just those things, but those were a couple of highlights for me. The cold open in this one was the Chicago World's Exposition in 1893, I think. And we saw like really early Tech Boy, and he had like a bowler hat, and he just, I don't know, look, Bruce Langley's adorable. And he was kind of, you know, in one of these exhibition tents showing something off. And nearby was this other character, Maximilian the illusionist, and he's, you know, showing a crowd of people his illusions. He's a magician, and then they get to Tech Boy's exhibition, and he's got an automaton. So it's like a face and like a bust of a person, but and it can do one trick. It can write. You know, I think it wrote like Chicago World Exposition or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. And that's like his one thing that he can do with this technology. And people are like, well, make it do something else. And he's like, I don't know how to make it do something else. And then they're like, ah, and they all leave. And he's real sad and unsure of himself and nervous. And, you know, it's like, oh no. And so then Maximilian comes along and is basically like, you need to sell it better. You need to make it do things. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Just show people what it can do. And, you know, fake it till you make it. And talks about Edison and light bulbs. And, you know, Edison said he discovered or invented the light bulb before he actually did, and all this stuff. And he's very showy, and you know, Tech Boy is like kind of overwhelmed by everything that's going on. And then he, you know, thinks about it and starts working on it and stuff. So that's the cold open. That's history of Tech Boy, some of that. And one of the key things that comes back later in the episode is that the automaton isn't actually doing all of the things when he figures out how to make it do things like play chess. It's not doing everything that he says it's doing. He's actually underneath it in a box. And so then Maximilian comes and like smashes this glass that covers the box and exposes that Tech Boy is a fraud. So he tells him to fake it. Then he exposes that he's a faker. And so I don't know how Maximilian will come back into it. I don't know if he's another version of a different god or what he is beyond this. I've thought about it. I've seen some people saying maybe he's an earlier version of Odin. I don't know. Given that we've seen Odin or Mr. Wednesday as the same actor the whole time, I wouldn't necessarily think that would be it, but you never know. It could be. So then we go on to Bilquis'S story. So if we'll remember, she's in a cell. She had been taken by the minions of Bill Sanders, who was like a tech, you know, kind of Bill Gates kind of guy. And Mr. World then had come in and had an intimidating conversation with her because she's supposed to be helping him, but she then had decided to be more neutral after not being able to convince the old gods that, you know, the tech ways were better, etc. And so she's been kidnapped. She's in this cell, and she is trying to figure out, what happened to her. And she talks to Oshun. So the Orishas, the old gods that came over, at least in some part, with slavery, they had shown up and are now, she's talking to them internally, so nobody else can see them, but she can. And they're having a conversation, and she is trying to figure out who she is. So meanwhile, in the current Tech Boy incarnation, he is still paired up with Shadow. They are looking for Bilquis. They were last episode, in episode 4, they were, on the road looking for Bilquis. And so they're still looking for her, and they're trying to break into this facility that she's in because they figured out where she was from some of the minions. And Tech Boy is not, he's not up to snuff. He's not able to break into the technological, lockbox that is keeping them from her. Meanwhile, inside, Bilquis is having an epiphany about who she is, thanks to the Orisha. They are all dancing with her. They're reminding her of her heritage. And she comes back into, I wouldn't say comes into her own, because obviously she's had this kind of power in her past and has forgotten it, has allowed, I believe the line is basically she had allowed others to tell her what she was for so long that she forgot her real origins and powers. And so the Orisha and Oshun in particular are having these conversations, reminding her of her power and that she is a giver of life. And so as a giver of life, they are all dancing together. It's beautiful scene. It's a beautiful scene. Everyone looks amazing. Yetide, who plays Bilquis, is like so great. She's always great, but just this scene, this episode was very moving. And when they have interacted to an extent that she's built her power back up, she is able to use that power to fill her cell with water and attack the people who are holding her in the cell. And so she basically drowns everyone, fills this cell with water, and then steps out of the door opens, and she steps out of this wall of water, and it's so cool. It's just like sometimes the visuals are just amazing, and that's all there is to say about it. It's just it's moving the way that they do it, and Bilquis is very regal in this scene and very clearly empowered and centered, which is something that she had not been in several of the previous episodes, especially after the Bill Sanders incident, where he, she said that his emptiness added to her own, as opposed to with her other worshippers, where they are supposed to satisfy her or sate her. He had not done so. And so she was off center. She was unsure of herself. Now she is fully in her power and comes out, and Tech Boy is still off. Whatever she had done to him before, he is still dealing with that. He kind of ripples, and he's a mess. But Shadow is super happy to see her, and you can see it like in his face. It's such a great scene where they see each other, and he's just really like in awe of her, because why wouldn't you be? She's amazing. So then they're talking. I think this is in Chicago. I believe it is, but I could be wrong on that. And they're walking this kind of beautiful, little light bulbs everywhere market area outdoors. And they're talking, and this is when she tells Shadow that she says, "I had come to believe what others believed of me was me," which is a great line, because I mean, it's for all of us, it's hard to stay centered sometimes, especially if we're, getting messages of people thinking we are something we're not, or something we don't think we are. And it's easy to, sometimes believe that those people are correct, or you're not as much as you feel you are, or something like that. A lot of people like to tear people down for no reason. Maybe there are reasons, but sometimes it's just to make themselves feel better. And so Bilquis is saying that, others believed I was this sort of thing, this being, and I am not. I am more than that. So, and her other line that is super great is, what the future holds is up to us to decide. So this, I mean, all of the episodes have their own different themes, and this one is really starting to, like, what is Shadow? What is Bilquis? Are they, they're not static, they're changing, they're becoming more of what they think they are, or learning more about who they are. Shadow as the son of a god, and Bilquis as a goddess who had turned into something other than what she originally was. So I just really love all of that. That whole thing is great. The whole chunk of story that is Bilquis, and Bilquis coming into her power again, and Bilquis and Shadow discussing what that means. It's just beautiful. This was, cast members had said this was a really favorite episode for them, and I can see why. So they cut briefly over to Wednesday, who is catatonic in the hospital, and he's basically, as we might recall from last episode, the Valhalla bar had blown up, and he had emerged from it, torn all his clothes off, and was wandering naked in the street reciting poetry. And the question was, is he really crazy? Is he trying to be crazy? Because Demeter, one of the reasons she was in the retreat she's in is because she had been wandering around naked in the street. And is he, like, kind of doing that to get into the retreat as well and all of that? But at the moment, he's in the hospital. So then we're back to Bilquis and Shadow. American Gods has, always has these little tiny cutscenes, and so I'm trying not to confuse people, but it was like, here we were with Bilquis, Wednesday briefly in the hospital, and now we're back. But they're in this excellent looking restaurant that I would love to know where that was. It reminds me of a couple I've been in, and I don't know, but the decor, everything's very, opulent and beautiful. And, they're eating French fries because everything's better with French fries. And we can all agree on that, probably. And they're having discussions about what Shadow's going to do, how he's going to choose to be, and all of that kind of thing. At that point, Shadow chooses to call Marguerite, who is still in Lakeside. And he says he's, checking in to see if there's any news on Allison, who, if we'll recall, is the girl who went missing, or the young woman who went missing from Lakeside, who he had some brief interactions with and had been questioned about her disappearance because he happened to be out of town right around when she disappeared, and then he was cleared. So he's checking in on Allison, but there's also that vibe of like, hey, I just kind of wanted to talk to you, and this is my excuse. So got a little Marguerite interest going on there, and it seems to be going both ways. The trope of the antagonistic meeting, and then, oh, maybe we're actually going to become friends or something else. So there's some Marguerite interest going on there, and they have a little chat. And then Wednesday is with Demeter, and they are, they're verbally sparring. He still wants her on his side. She is still not having it. So there's a lot of back and forth going on. I don't feel like he's gaining much ground. And they have a little wager that, they can spend some time together. And I think, what is the terms of the wager? Like, he has to last a week in the retreat or something to that extent. And then she can find out what's in his heart. And she says that's a terrifying prospect, which is probably true. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen with them, but they're still kind of sparring and figuring out what's going to happen. Meanwhile, in the third bit of people who I'm enjoying the journey of, we have Ibis, Jaquel, and Salim, who are at the funeral home, having some discussions about the different funerary practices of Islam versus, whoever is on the table at that time. But basically, Salim is called out for being in the funeral home to hide out from his emotional pain. And he's trying to convince them that they should work with him, like he could have business with them. And they're like, I don't think that's really necessary. And then Laura shows up. So we've got Salim and Laura back together again, and she's looking for Mr. Wednesday. She's still mad about the whole you know, Mad Sweeney was sent to kill her, and then Wednesday, you know, killed Mad Sweeney and all of the thing, and, you know, she's pretty upset about all that. And so she's looking for Wednesday, and she and Salim chat a little bit, and then we go back to Shadow, who has now found Mr. Wednesday. So now Shadow has gone over to the retreat, and he's pushing Mr. Wednesday around, or the hospital. He's pushing Mr. Wednesday around in a wheelchair because Wednesday is whatever is wrong with him. Something is wrong with him, theoretically. And you know, Shadow is basically like, you blew up a bar so you could get into this place, and, you know, talking about the cons and how Wednesday is a con, and Wednesday's like, I want you to do a con for me. So it's so much going on in this episode. It's crazy. So he wants Shadow to do a number 37 with him, and Shadow's like, I don't think so. I'm not going to go back to jail. And then Wednesday's like, but she was my wife, about Demeter, and basically the number 37 con is an attempt to figure out the illegal dealings or doings of the conservator who is in charge of Demeter's being stuck in this retreat. Although she doesn't seem to care about being stuck in the retreat, but that's what's going on there. And at that point, Wednesday introduces Shadow to Demeter as his son. Demeter's like, oh, okay, because I don't think she knew about that. And they kind of chat a little bit. I think she's painting, and, you know, it's kind of a, you know, idyllic scene, except for the whole Mr. Wednesday trying to con everyone. So now we're back to Laura and Salim and Ibis, and they're talking about, like, why Laura's alive. And this is another part of my ongoing favorites, is Laura completely trying to deny that she had a thing for Mad Sweeney or that Mad Sweeney loved her, and denying that the blood that, you know, his blood that from last episode, when his blood that was in, when his blood that was in the crypt mixed with the vial of voodoo potion that she had been given, that had to be mixed with the blood of a true love, mixed together, those two mixed together, and that was what yanked her out of purgatory. So, you know, it's obvious that's what happened, but she's still trying to deny it because she's Laura. So, meanwhile, let's see, what's happening now? Yes. All right. At this point, Shadow is on the fence about the number 37, and he's talking to Cordelia, who, if we'll remember, is Wednesday's originally fake fiance, and just basically he's paying her to help him out in all of this stuff, and she's going along with it because it was interesting and he's paying her. And there might be more to her than that, but they're talking, and Shadow's basically pretty skeptical about Wednesday's motives, and she says, you know, he was like really into getting ready to see Demeter, and he was really nervous, and maybe this is real, and maybe it is. We don't know. That's what Mr. Wednesday's all about. We don't know. But, you know, she's kind of on his side regarding the idea of doing this con. So, moving right along, Laura's continuing to deny what happened, and Salim says something super sweet, as other actors have said, and the American Gods Twitter has said, Salim is too pure for this world. He's so sweet. And he says, every beat of your heart shows that you were loved by someone. You're very fortunate. And I love that, you know, because that is the answer. That's the truth of what happened. She was loved by Mad Sweeney, the blood mixed with the potion, and that's why she's here. And in return, Laura's like, whatever, you got to stop being so mopey, man. And so she's like, I'm going to go kill Wednesday. Why don't you come with me? And then we get this great little Demore Barnes scene where Mr. Ibis is like, you can take my car. And Salim's like, either you are very generous or you really want me to leave. And Ibis is like, yes. And I love it. It's so funny. There's some great little tiny character moments in the midst of all of the bombastic stuff that's going on. So Shadow decides to do the number 37 con. The number 37 con is very complicated. It's got Ricky Whittle doing an Australian accent. It's got, you know, like Cordelia's in wigs. It's got all this crazy stuff. But basically what they do is they con the guy who's the conservator into giving them his phone, and then he tries to call the police, or I'm sorry, they steal his phone. They steal his briefcase. That's what it is. And then he tries to call the police, and it goes to Cordelia instead of the police because Shadow has lent his phone to be, the phone that's called, so they can control where it goes. And all this shenanigans stuff goes on. They get this briefcase. It's got files in it. It's got his computer in it. They're able to break into it because Cordelia is a tech genius person, and they're able to find offshore accounts, and they threaten him to free Caroline Wells, who's Demeter, and her money, and also to transfer some money from his Gaiman's account. And so they convince him, because of this con, to free Demeter, all her money, and extra money for them. So good on them. It's a crazy back and forth. It's like, it's fun. It's very Ocean's 11. And then we're almost at the end of this. We've got Laura and Salim in the car. He's decided to go with her. They're talking about purgatory. They're talking about what they believe, and Salim reveals that he doesn't pray anymore because he doesn't know who to pray to or for what. And that's a really interesting step from his religious devotion earlier in the series. So that's where Salim is at. And, at this point, we've got Demeter being released from prison. Laura is on the road. They are all going towards their own different journeys, and Wednesday and Demeter are still kind of back and forth, and it's kind of awkward, and there's some weird awkwardness going on. Then we get a little tiny glimpse of Tech Boy. We haven't seen him since almost the beginning of the episode, and he's running through this huge warehouse, and then he's glitching. And he gets to the automaton that we saw in the cold open, which is worn, like its face is worn from time and everything. And he gets under the box that he was in before when he controlled it, and is in there. And it's like, this is Tech Boy's safe space. And at this point, I just want to protect Bruce Langley, who is Tech Boy, because like he seems very vulnerable. But of course, in other episodes, he's been a complete beep. So he's very mercurial, and I think Bruce Langley said, tech can be used for good or for bad or etc. And he would love to see explorations of what tech has done for medicine and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's interesting and fun that they're showing the vulnerabilities of this god versus just earlier when he was very bombastic and he was a real jerk and all of that kind of stuff. So he is in his safe space, and it's kind of sweet, which is odd given what I just said about his other personality-ness. And we end up in Lakeside. This is where we end the episode. Lakeside, Shadow's gone back, and he says hi to Mabel, and Mabel's catching him up on all the news, including a panty stealer. And then he looks over, and Laura is sitting there next to him, and that is where we end. So that is episode 5. It's a ride. I really love the Tech Boy stuff. I love the Laura and Salim stuff. I love the Bilquis stuff. It's just a great, and the Ocean's 11. It's just that this episode was packed. So now we're going to move on to episode 6. We're going to be seeing that at 8 o'clock tonight if we haven't already seen it. And this one is called Conscience of the King. And, I want to know what's going to happen with Tech Boy. I don't know how much of that we're going to see. Because he's not in the main Shadow story at the moment, because obviously Shadow already used him to help with the finding of Bilquis, etc. But I'm just really curious because he's one of my favorite characters, and I want to see what's happening with Mr. World, because obviously Bilquis has escaped now, and that's a blow to Mr. World. And Tech Boy, and as we see here, we're going to get more Mr. Worlds or Ms. Worlds. We've got a bunch of people playing that character, and so we'll be seeing more different versions of Mr. World or Ms. World, and that's really interesting too. That's fun to see. How are they going to play it? And I really want to see what Ms. or Mr. World and Tech Boy are going to get up to, and how his recent issues and journey are going to play into what's going on now. Obviously, we're going to see Laura and Shadow because we end with them at the diner or the restaurant together at Mabel's restaurant, and I want to see what happens there. Are we going to see Marguerite and Laura and Shadow all love triangling it up somewhere? Are they going to all meet? I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I'm interested. And so, what else is going to happen in Lakeside? When are we going to see Chad? I love Chad. I really love Chad. So we need to see some more of our favorite sheriff. So hopefully some Lakeside stuff, some Laura, Shadow, Marguerite stuff. Who knows? The Demeter storyline is still kind of going along. It's a slow burn. I don't know what is going to happen with that. It feels like that one has both moved and not super moved in terms of there's been a lot of movement, but their relationship hasn't really changed. So is that going to change or not? So we're going to see what happens there. And I don't know, like, well, probably I feel like it's going to be a lot of Tech Boy, Mr. World, and or Laura, Marguerite, Shadow, Lakeside, and Mr. Wednesday kind of comes in and out of it, you know, because it is Shadow's story, so we don't need to see him all the time. So that's what I'm thinking. Again, at 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight, it's going to be, we can all watch on Stars. You can go to the hashtag AVChatWEMMNSU. My handle is there at the Emily ESSE. Let me know what you think of my crazy recaps. I'm trying for you guys. It is a very complicated show. Or just let me know that you watched and if you're enjoying it, and or if you followed any of my recommendations or anything you want. So great to talk with everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.